Hello, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2022. I'm Darlene with Digital Photo Mentor, and this is our first live stream of the new year. So we are coming to you at a new time for the weekly live stream on Saturday, obviously right now. So this is our first live stream at this time slot. So if you are in Europe and you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We're glad to have you. If you are in Australia, New Zealand, or otherwise down under, and it's early morning where you are, grab a coffee and join us. So, a couple of things as we get started. Just if you're new here, what I'm going to be doing today is taking subscriber submitted images, which you can do as well. And I would encourage you to do so, hence the sign over here. Subscriber submitted images, and I will be editing them, a few of them live on the screen today. So you'll be able to learn how I approach image editing, what I'm looking for, and how to know what to do to an image, right? So it'll give you some ideas anyways on how to approach your image editing process. In order to submit your images, my husband Rob is in the chat. You'll see him there. He will give you a link to where to submit your images. And if you're watching this afterwards as a recording, the link is below the video. So we're always looking for people like you to submit their images. I'm looking for raw images in particular, and there's a form where you can submit those, a Google form, so that I have the best quality to work with. Okay, you don't have to be a professional. Your images can, if you're a beginner, that's totally fine. Your images can be anything. And if it's something that you're struggling to edit, ideally send that to me and give me a note as to what it is you're trying to do with that image, and I'll see if I can demonstrate that for you. And then your job or your homework will be to replicate what I create. So submitting your images, and let's see where that goes. So I've got a few images submitted this week by some of our regulars. Let's see who is in the chat here. So we've got Nina. Hi, Nina. Okay, we do have some from Australia. So nice to have you, Lynette. So some early birds there. Nigel in the Caribbean. Happy New Year. And Trish as well. Okay, so we're getting some early birds. I've got one of your images today, Trish, just in case you were here. So perfect. Awesome. This is great. Cold Alaska. Well, tell us how cold, Deb, because we've been in the deep freeze here in Edmonton for the last couple of weeks. So I'd love to know how cold it is up in Alaska. Holly, Happy New Year. Great to see you. I'll see you after this as well. We have a tutoring session. Ireland. Okay, we're getting some Europe. Welcome, Anne. AJ, welcome. I'm glad you found the time slot. And there's the link that Rob's provided to submit your photos. See, Vicky will contest. It is chilly in Edmonton, so I can even show you our temperatures on the screen here. But let's get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you're here. Looks like we've got a nice turnout today. So I am going to switch over to my Lightroom, and I'll be right back. Okay, let me get some of this stuff off my screen here and make my Lightroom bigger. Okay, so these are the images that I've got to play with today. And you can see I've got one of yours, Trish. I waited for you because I wanted to do this garage one when you were here live. Awesome. Okay, so I've got some great images. Deb, I see your Aurora Northern Lights images are fantastic. Deb says it's -7 in Alaska. So I'm assuming that's Fahrenheit. And we are in Celsius. So let's just see what the conversion is on that. -7 is -21. We're a little bit colder. I think we're -28 Celsius today. So about the same, but we've actually been a lot colder. So Jean-Philippe, bienvenue. It's cold in Edmonton as well, but we have warm heart. Yes, we do. Awesome. So next question I have for you all as I get started on these images, I'd love to know how you found out about this live stream and about my channel, and but in general, specifically about this live stream, right? Did you see it on Facebook? Was it in one of the emails that I sent, or did somebody else tell you about it? So I'd love to know how you heard about it as I dig in and get started. So Rita's not here. Nancy is, Deb is, and Trish is. So I've got a few people here. I'm going to start with Trish's because I've been holding on to this one for a while now, right? So I've gone back to the basics, and remind me, Trish, what program you're using to edit your images. I'm just going to call up my notes here from everybody's submissions. I think you're using Luminar, if I remember correctly, right, Trish? So I'm going to show some Lightroom editing here on this one to do some color correction, and then I'm probably going to pull it into Luminar. Awesome. Thanks, Holly. Somebody says, one good thing about Facebook is you find out about stuff like this. Awesome. Okay, so Trish, the first thing I'm going to do, so anytime I start with an image, the first thing I'm going to do is look at things like cropping and is the image straight or tilted. So this one is crooked. Okay, you can see by the verticals here, they're crooked. Okay, so there's a few ways that we can correct that. But I want to crop this one because there's a lot of extraneous, or what I would call extraneous stuff going on, especially on the edges of the image. And then there's a big empty spot here. Okay. So what is the subject of this image? That's how I'm going to decide how to crop it. So the most interesting part of this image for me is this mechanical or parts gorilla sitting on top of this old car. Okay. I'm not crazy about this sign here. We'll see what we can do about that. But this is my subject here in the middle. Then there's another sort of parts statue I guess they're making with this guy here. Then there's stuff over here that kind of is sticking in and I don't want to see it. Stuff down the bottom that isn't really relevant. So there's a lot of extra space around here. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just correct the tilt. And if you're using Lightroom, you can go into the crop tool and just hit auto, and it will try and correct the tilt for you. Okay, so you can see how it's straightened it. If you're using Luminar, there's a similar button that you click and it will do that as well. Okay, now I'm going to crop, but I'm going to undo this little lock button. Okay, so this is your aspect ratio. So aspect ratio is how does the length relate to the width. Okay, so the original aspect ratio is 4:6, right? That's what your camera shoots. So I'm actually going to go with custom. Okay, so I can either change it to custom or just unlock it. Okay, so now that it's unlocked, I can do any kind of crop that I want. Okay, so I can make it square, I can make it panoramic, and so on. Okay, if it's locked, when I drag the corner, I can't rearrange the shape. Okay, I can't change the proportions. Okay, does that make sense? So that's the aspect ratio. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of this stuff on the side here because I don't need any of that stuff. That's not part of the image. I want to try and get rid of as much of this thing sticking in on the left as possible, and I may clone that out. And then I'm going to come in from the bottom because look at the bottom third of the image. It's mostly blank space, okay? And there's nothing in that space that's adding to the image. It just makes it feel like the subject is farther away when we have so much foreground, okay? So I'm going to come up there. Now that looks pretty good. Hit enter. Okay, so now I've corrected the tilt problem and gotten rid of a lot of the extraneous matter. Now, when you were shooting this image, I don't know, oops, if you had a longer lens to work with or not. Yeah, it looks like you did. Okay, so you're shooting the Fuji XT, which is a great camera, XT2. I have the same lens, 18 to 135. So you're shooting at 35, and in this case, you could have zoomed in quite a bit to get rid of a lot of that stuff when you were shooting, Trish. Okay, so try and crop in camera as much as possible and get closer to the subject if you can. Maybe you couldn't get physically closer because of a barrier or something, but try and get closer with a zoom lens or physically closer if you can. Right? Let's see what everybody says about that. All right. following us. New Jersey, awesome. So, question for you about cropping, right? So, when you are shooting, do you find that you end up cropping a lot of your images off, like I just did? Okay, so tell me yes or no about cropping in the chat below. Do you crop a lot off, or do you try and get it as best you can in camera? Because the problem with doing what I just did is that now the image is a lot smaller pixel size, okay? Because we've now cropped off pixels. I don't know if you can see this here or not. That should give you a better view. Okay, so the original size was 6,000 by 4,000 pixels, and now it's only 4,000 by 90 by 3150. So we've literally cropped off a third of the image, okay? So you don't want to do that as much as possible because now the image physically is smaller, less pixels, okay? Let me get back in here. The next thing that I want to do is fix this color cast. Okay, there's this weird green color cast here. And I can also change the color profile or the camera profile. Looks like Trish has used Provia, which is a great one. I often use that. Changing to Astia or some of the others kind of lessens that problem, but the issue is this green color, okay? So we could go through all kinds of masking and do different things to try and get rid of it, but the simplest way to do that is in the HSL panel, okay? So I'm going to go over here to saturation and click on this little targeted adjustment tool, okay? So you can see that if I hover over it, it tells me adjust saturation by dragging in the photo. So when I click on it, it gives me this little X and a little crosshairs, right? And then when I click on here, I'm going to click on the green area. You can see I'm on his shoulder and hold. Now when I drag it down, I'm lowering the saturation of anything that is that color. Okay, now look what's happening. If I go all the way down, you can see that it slid the aqua and the blue slider a little bit. But look at the difference. Look what it's done. Okay, it's gotten rid of that color cast without having to do any masking or painting. Okay, so this one works really well because there isn't anything else in the image that is that color that I want to maintain. If there was something else that was that color, like the car, for example, then I might have to do some masking. But this was a really simple fix to get rid of that color cast. Okay, see that? The other option, of course, would be going to a black and white. Whose shots do I have today? Rob, you were suggesting that I have some of somebody's shots. Oh, Anne is here. Hey, Anne. Yes, I do have one of your images, Anne. Okay, so we could go to black and white on this image, but I have another plan, okay? And I'm going to take that into the Luminar to do that. The other thing I can do is, remember how I said I don't like this sign over here? I could also do the same thing with the red, right, on the sign. But watch what happens. This is where other colors that are red are getting affected. So now the car is losing its color, okay? So I'm not going to do that. I want to leave that one. Okay, I'm going to add a vignette and just darken the edges. And this is a preset that I've created for Lightroom, and all it does is sets up these sliders in the effects panel. Rob, if you could share a link to our Lightroom presets, please, if people are interested in that. Great. Deb says it's harder to shoot wildlife, so cropping more when wildlife. Yeah, that makes sense for sure, Deb. And wildlife photographers, typically birds as well, have really long lenses, you know, like a 400 to 600 kind of lens to be able to do that. So yeah, absolutely. AJ wants to know, isn't that the advantage of high pixel cameras in terms of cropping, I believe is the question. Yes, that is the advantage of the high pixel cameras, but even still, you don't want to pay $6,000 for a full frame high pixel camera, high resolution camera, and then crop 50% of it out, right? Ideally, you still want to get it as close as possible in camera, right? Cropping to do things like, remove something on the bottom, or to make a different aspect ratio like I did, or to crop something out on the edge is a minor or crooked, but you don't want to crop 50% of your image out as a habit. If you find that you're doing that a lot, AJ, just make a mental note to try and get closer, again, either physically or with a zoom when you're actually shooting. Okay. Great question. Thanks, AJ. Okay, so now we've got that. Let's just look at the before and after. We've got some corrections done. Now I'm going to go back to the basic panel and do my usual things. So I'm going to shift, double click on the word whites, and shift, double click on the word blacks, right? And if you've watched this before, I talk about this often. If you could share another video, Rob, we have on the basic sliders in Lightroom. I go into that in more detail in that video as well. And what I'm doing here is setting up so that the histogram, the image information touches the edge of the graph. Okay, so if I bring the whites up higher, I start to get clipping. I'm holding the Alt Option key down currently, right? And you can see that when I bring this all the way up, I'm getting clipping. So clipping means no detail, right? So with the slider, I want to have touching the edge of the graph, but not clipping in the whites. You can see there's a couple of places clipping, and mostly it's just in that headlight, so I'm not worried about that. On the blacks, I want to clip a little bit more because it will increase the contrast overall. Okay, so look at the difference. A little bit of contrast, gotten rid of that color cast, right? Now it's time to decide aesthetically and artistically, how do we want to edit the image? So I've taken care of a few sort of technical issues. Now it's the time to decide, what do we want to do with this image? So my first thought was some sort of an antique, grungy, partial black and white looking image. Okay. And you can do that in Lightroom, but I actually prefer doing it in Luminar because I've created myself a template for that, or a preset. I'm going to just do a little bit of clarity and maybe a little bit of texture, but I'm going to leave it there and hop over to Lightroom, okay? Because I can do this in Lightroom, but I actually, like I said, prefer the tools in Luminar, okay? Anne wants to know, does the Alt Option key work in Camera Raw? I'm assuming when you're using Photoshop, and it should, yes. So when you hit Alt Option, it should give you, if you're in the Camera Raw filter or Camera Raw app, it should give you the same clipping warnings. Yes, good question. If you have a question as we're going along, as AJ and Anne have done, please pop it into the chat. And if I miss it, Rob will bring it to my attention, and I will try and answer your question live, which is the advantage of why you're watching me live. All right, so now I'm going to pop over to Lightroom, to Luminar, pardon me. Now, if you are not a Luminar user or you haven't seen it before, this is a great chance for me to, for you to see what it does and why I like to use it in my workflow as a plugin, okay? You can also use it as a standalone. So to evoke Luminar, I right-click on the image, and there's actually two ways to get to it, okay? I can choose Edit In and then choose my plugin, okay? So you can see I've got some Topaz ones also, and then choose Luminar AI. Or I can choose Export and go to Edit a Copy or Edit Source File. Okay, so if I edit a copy, it's going to take what I have on my screen now that I've already edited in Lightroom and take that over to Luminar. If I choose Source File, it takes the raw file. Okay, so I lose all the edits that I've done in Lightroom. Okay, so if you want to work on the raw file in Luminar, do Edit Source File. Okay, but it will go back to the original. So I'm going to do Edit in Luminar AI. Okay, and for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to use a JPEG. But I'm going to be doing, actually, here's another opportunity. We haven't got this, the registration page ready yet, but we're going to be doing a webinar on the 17th about getting better quality images. And this is one of the things that I'm going to talk about is color space and file format. So if you are not already a subscriber on my email list, make sure that you sign up, because I will be sending out a notice of the webinar that I will be doing on the 17th. Okay. We're going to be doing a lot of webinars in the next couple of months. Some will be free and some will be a minimal or a small fee of about $10. Rob, if you could share a link to somewhere where they can sign up to the email list if they're not already on it, that would be great. So for the purposes of demonstration today, I'm just going to be using a smaller file because it will run faster on my computer. When I'm doing live streaming, my computer tends to get bogged down a little bit because it's trying to live stream video and run a couple of editing programs at a time. Right? So we'll also talk about that in terms of minimum specs for computers when you're running them, right? When you're doing photo editing. Okay, so Luminar is opening on my other monitor. Let me just drag it over here. All right, so now it's opened up the image. And as I mentioned, I have a template that I created that I think will work great on this image, and it's called, what is it called? Antique Touch, right? And what it does is it creates sort of this old looking faded black and white, right? So that's what I had in my mind for this image when I saw it. And right out of the gate, that template works really great, okay? When you apply a template in Luminar AI, you can dial it down, so you can lessen the effect using this slider here, right at the bottom. Or once you get into the edit section, it tells you which things it has applied, right, with a little dot next to them, okay? Luminar Neo is coming soon. Hey, I'd love to do a little informal survey of those that of you are here who has pre-ordered Luminar Neo. I know somebody mentioned that earlier. If you have pre-ordered Luminar Neo, please indicate so in the chat. If you're not familiar with it, I have a couple of videos on Neo and whether or not I think you should buy it or who it's for. Maybe Rob, if you could share a link to the Luminar Neo Is It Worth It video. If you're not familiar with that, you can watch it. Calvin's pre-ordered it. Awesome. I do have an early copy of it, Calvin, and it's only got a couple of things working now, but and as well. Oh, it looks like quite a few. Okay, so Nigel has, Deb has. Great. I answered this question. Anne wants to know if it replaces AI. No, it doesn't. It's in addition to. It's kind of like Adobe Photoshop Elements versus Photoshop CC. But if you watch the video, Rob's going to put a link in the chat, Anne. You can watch that video, and I explain more about Luminar Neo and the differences between AI and Neo. Yeah, it looks like a lot of people have. Great. Okay. So if I find an image today that I can use to preview in Neo, there's not a lot of tools there. Maybe you can share the other video, Rob, on the quick sneak peek that I did of Neo for those that have pre-ordered it. And I'll be doing more of those and actually creating a course. So to get back on this one, we're getting off track today. We're just kind of chatting. Once you've got the template in AI applied, anything that the template has done will have a little dot beside it. Okay, so I can check the vignette, for example, and my trick, remember, if you've watched me before, is to turn the feather down to 0, and then I can see where it's applying, okay? So if I want to make it a lot smaller, so I want to maybe darken this guy, make it rounder, and then I can move it over so that I'm focusing more on this guy and not this other fellow, right? I'm calling them fellows, but they're obviously statues or something. Okay, so now I can see that what this vignette is doing is now really drawing the emphasis in here. Okay, details. This one looks like I did a mask on this one because I only wanted it in certain areas. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a radial mask. Shoot. Nope, I'm not going to do a radial mask. I am just going to clear it. And I'm going to paint in these details over the area that I want to have more sharpening and detail. Okay, so again, this is another way that you can draw attention to your subject. Okay, so light is one, right? Sharpness and detail is another. So I'm only applying the sharpness and detail in this area and not everywhere else. Okay, so does anybody remember the 4 ways to get attention to your subject, or 4 ways to avoid things in the background? I'll just put that on the screen. Okay, so these are things you want to have on the subject: sharpness, color, contrast, and brightness, and avoid those things on the background. Okay, which is why I want to get rid of that red on that sign. So those are the things that you can use in your processing as well to draw attention to the subject. Okay. Now that I've got this mask painted how I want it, I'm actually going to copy it. And then I'm actually going to apply some structure, and I'm just going to boost it really high so you can see what structure does. It's kind of like clarity in Lightroom. Then I'm going to apply that same mask by pasting it. Okay, so now you can really see what it's doing. Now I've taken this to extreme with a structure because you can see the edges are now sort of blurry, but look at how the sharpness of that really pulls your eye into the middle here. I'm not going to go quite as extreme, so it blends a little bit nicer, like so. But look at the difference now. You can really see the eye is going more into that middle guy, okay? And I might even go a little farther with my details now. See how that's really affecting the middle guy. Small details, I tend to avoid that one unless I need to sharpen the image, and that's a little trick for sharpening. Okay. And we don't have any portraits in this one, so I'm just going to undo these. Anytime you have AI tools applied in Luminar AI, it's going to actually make the program run a little bit slower. So in this case, I'm not using any of the portrait AI tools. So turning them off will help me, will help the program work faster, right? You'll notice that I've got film grain applied on this one as well. And if I turn it up, you can see that it's giving this really sort of speckly look. And I felt that that goes well with the antique style. Okay, so now it really fits with the car and the subject matter. Otherwise, the only thing I'm going to do here is go into this color, and I'm going to actually dial this red down. Okay, so remember how I dialed the red down in Lightroom? And the disadvantage, I'm actually going to reset this here. When I dialed it down in Lightroom, it also affected the car. Okay, I only want it to affect this sign. So I'm going to bring the saturation down, and I'm also going to bring the luminance up. Okay, so you can see that it's actually making the sign blend a little better. And then I'm just going to paint it only into the sign. Oops, smaller. I'm using these square bracket keys to change my brush size. Okay, so see how I've painted that just into the sign? Let me turn it off. See how it's just affecting the sign on the red now? Okay. And maybe not so much luminance. I could actually darken it. I'm just trying to get it to blend in a little bit more. See that? Like so. Okay, so now we've got a before and after. And I'm going to go a little darker with this vignette. Now I want to deal with this post up here, right? Doing a cloning of something that is this big, don't attempt it in Lightroom, because Lightroom does not have a great cloning tool. Okay? Anne asked about where can you buy my Luminar presets. Actually, Rob, if you could please give a link to our Fabulous Faces templates. They're actually called templates in Luminar AI. So there are 4 portraits, Anne, but as you can see, I applied this one here and it worked great as well, right? I'll actually show another one because I've got another template that might work really well on this one. It's called Ghoulish Grunge. I'm just going to apply it and then undo it. Okay, so that one works really well on this image and takes it a completely different direction. So like I said, even though these are created for portraits, they work really well on just about any kind of image, right? So you can apply them on anything. Do an undo. Okay. And let's see, I'm going to actually boost the contrast a little bit more here. And I'm going to use smart contrast in the light panel. Okay, that looks good. Look at that. That looks really good for bringing out that gorilla guy, right? And then let's deal with the post that I want to erase. Okay, the erase tool in Luminar actually does a really good job, and I've been super impressed with it a number of times. So I'm just going to paint over this entire pipe. And I haven't tried this before, okay? So you're going to see this live time as to what it's going to do and whether it does a good job. So fingers crossed, okay? Let's see what it does. Ha! Look at that. Okay, so it did kind of do a mess a little bit right here, but you can see it's not lining up that line, but it did a great job everywhere, right? So I'll show you the quick fix there. All I got to do is draw another one there, do another quick erase, because now it's going to look for lining up. So that it works in what's called content aware. If you use Photoshop, it's like content aware fill. Right, so it's still not getting it. I'm going to do one more pass all the way to the edge, and I'm going to see if I can get it to straighten out. Okay, I did this on another thing where it had an angular line, and it ended up just straightening out the line. So I just had to do a couple of different passes, right? There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to do it over here. Oops, I'm going to do a smaller brush. So now I'm going to do it here to see if I can get it to straighten out that line. Right. Is Trish still here? I know you were here, Trish. Are you watching all of this? Okay. It still didn't quite do it. So I can do an undo, which is Command or Control Z or Z. Then I'm going to clear the selection, and I'm going to just try it one little piece at a time. So I find that this erase tool works great. Sometimes you have to just do it in smaller little chunks like I'm doing here. I don't want to do several. That worked better. I don't want to do several because if it gets one, if I do 6 points and it gets one wrong, then I have to undo all of them. So I kind of do one at a time and just see how it does, especially on stuff like this that's super difficult. Okay, so you notice I'm just trying to do it a couple of again and again. Okay. Anne says, wow, that's cool. Yeah, so you can see that it's done a really good job. So now I'm going to just close the tool, and it's done a great job of removing that pipe. Okay, now is it perfect? No. But if you didn't know that pipe was there to begin with, would you even know that it was taken out? No. Having said that, I've now noticed that there is another thing that I might want to take out. So because this looks like it's a museum or an artist shop of some kind, it looks like there's a sign here. So let's just see if I can erase this guy too. Okay, so I'm being really careful with my outlining here, and let's see how it does. So I want to get rid of this little white. It looks like a description of something, right? Description of the art, maybe. Not great. So you kind of pulled this thing here, right? But maybe I can just clean up the edge a little bit. And is it better than, is it perfect? No. But is it better than having the big white thing there? Okay, your call. Okay, so if it doesn't work out as you planned, yeah, now it's making what I call a duplicate. Okay, so this is what you want to watch out for, especially when you're cloning in Photoshop. Okay, can you see that it's sort of making a repeat pattern here? Right, that's something you want to avoid, because when people look at that image, if they're a photographer, they're going to know that you cloned, right? And I'm just going to go back a couple of steps here. Oh, no, can't. I got to stay in the tool. I'm going to go back. If I go back, it's going to erase the whole thing. If you're a photographer, right, you'll know that something has been done, right? So it's a kind of a giveaway that you've done some cloning. And I should have zoomed in to 100% to begin with. when I was doing this one. Okay, so here's a lesson for you. Zoom in to 100%. Waiting for the tool. And then I'm going to try and get the edges a little better, right? There, let's try that. So especially when you're cloning, zoom into 100% so that you can see better when you're painting and do it a little bit more carefully. I didn't do a very good paint job the first time. Let's see how it does. Fingers crossed. We're spending lots of time on this one, so let's finish this one up. Oh, that's way better. Okay, so see how my paint job was just not so good the first time, and it's not perfect here on the edge of the truck, but I'm actually not going to worry about it. I'm just going to get rid of that white spot here. Okay, so remember again, bright areas take your eye attention, and this little white spot looks like on the wall behind it is grabbing my attention. Okay, so cloning's not perfect, but it's way better. Okay, so before and after. Okay, so we've done some aesthetic things here, and we have done some fixing things here in terms of color and removal of things, and I'm pretty happy with where this one has gone. So I could end there, or I'm going to just do a slight dodging and burning. If you're not familiar with those terms, they actually come from the days of film. Okay, so in the darkroom, you would do something called burning, which is what I'm doing right now, to darken an area. Okay, so they've just used those same terms. So when you see dodge and burn, right, often in Lightroom or actually in Photoshop, there is a dodge and burn tool. Burning is darkening and dodging is lightening. And you can see that in Luminar, they've actually simplified that for you. So it says lighten or darken. So you don't have to figure out which is which, right? And I'm using this one to get into these little smaller areas here, okay? Because I want to make sure that, again, he's the subject and the wall behind him is not grabbing so much attention. Okay? So it's just a little bit more of individual area tone control, like so. I'm happy with it. We're going to hit apply and go back to Lightroom. Rob's had to go feed the cats because the cat is freaking out. So what happens in our house is that it's lunchtime at 2 o'clock, which is coming up for them. And they will come and poke us in the bum with a claw or walk across our desk. So my cat is currently locked out of the office where I am, and that means that they're bothering Rob instead. So let's take a look at the two side by side here. Right? So the one on the left is what I brought from Lightroom over to Luminar, and the one on the right is the final Luminar edit. Okay? So that's kind of what I had in mind for this image. Right? What do you guys think? Oops. What do you guys think? Do you like that edit? What would you do with this one? Would you make it full black and white? Everybody's quiet today. Are you all sleeping? Do you need some more coffee? Let's go to the next one. Okay, so now Deb's here, and I want to work on these because she sent me some really cool Northern Lights or Aurora Borealis images, right? So let's take a look at this one. All right, so obviously this is Alaska, I'm guessing, Deb, which is where you live. We do get Northern Lights here in Alberta as well. It's been just too cold to go out and photograph right recently. People like the edit, like the sepia tone. Yeah, sometimes black and white, removing the color actually removes the distractions. Yeah, great point. Thanks for coming, Lynette. The replay basically will be up as soon as we're done, so you can watch it anytime later. And do join us again next week. Also, this is a great opportunity, excuse me, to remind you to please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also hit notification on the live to have YouTube send you a reminder of when the next one is coming up so you don't miss it. And also to please share this with other people because we'd love to get more people coming to the live streams. So share it with other photography friends and enthusiasts. Maybe you're a member of a camera club, share it with them. And we hope to see you next time, which is the same time next week on January 15th. All right, let's continue. So Northern Lights. All right, so let's take a look at what she photographed this with. Okay, so this is a Nikon RAW file. Okay, I can see that by the file extension, which is NEF. Okay, and I'm going to, the first thing I do generally is look at the camera profiles. Okay, so when you click this little 4 buttons or 4 squares up at the top here, okay, you can see that. This is the camera profile. So she's used the camera standard profile. When you click on the little 4 squares or thumbnails, it opens up this little box where you can preview. Okay, so I can just scroll through and hover over and it will show me a preview. Okay, so I could use vivid, which is highly contrasty and a lot more color saturation. Okay, I'm actually going to go with landscape because I like the contrast and the color that's coming out of there. It's a little bit dark, but we can fix that. Okay, so I'm going to change the camera profile, which automatically give us a little more contrast right out of the gate. Then I'm going to do shift double click, and where I'm double clicking is on the word whites. So I'm holding shift, double clicking. Okay, now I want to just do that one again because look at the stars and the actual aurora when I do that. Okay, so see how it brings the light out more, and look at the stars. Okay, the stars are the white part. Right now, when I clicked on black, it actually took the black to the right instead of to the left, and it actually lightened things up. Okay, I might not go as far. Okay, so you can see at 0, I had a lot of clipping. So I'm going to bring it up a little bit, and I'm going to bring the shadows up a little bit, and then exposure. Okay, so keep in mind that exposure is actually midtones. Okay, so you can even grab it from the histogram, and when I drag that, it's affecting the midtones. So it affects the sky. Got something on my screen more than it does the overall. Okay, so it's affecting the midtones, which I don't want to do as much. Okay, I like the sky to be dark, so I'm going to go with the blacks lighting up like I did a second ago. Oh, this is really cool. Look, you can even see there's sort of northern lights reflecting down here in the snow, right? What ISO? This is ISO 1600. Right. This is all great settings. If you're not familiar with photographing the northern lights, we actually have some tips on our website on doing that. If you're lucky enough to be in a place where you can see them, if you could please find that and share that link, Rob. He's back from cat feeding. The next thing I'm going to do is change the white balance. Okay, I'm going to try auto and see what it gives me. Now it warmed it up. I actually want to go the other way. So I'm just going to take this slider. You can grab the slider here, right? But you'll notice that if you grab the slider here, it kind of goes really far. So what I'm going to do is a scrubby slider. So if you put your mouse over, I'm going to zoom in so you can see this. If you put your mouse over the number, see how it changes? It's got this little finger and a side-to-side arrow. If you put your mouse there, I'm not clicking anything, I'm just holding the mouse there, then click and hold. You can see the, oops, don't highlight the number like I did, just click and hold, and then when you drag, it just goes slower. So what I'm looking to do is adjust it so that the sky is bluer. Can you see that? So that looks more blue. And then I'm going to do the same and give it a bit more magenta. Now be careful of going to magenta because then you lose the green in the sky. So if you want more magenta or purple in the sky, go to the right. If you want more green from the aurora, look what happens when I go to the left. Okay, so I'm going to give it a little more green. And now that I've done that, I'm going to go back and add a little more blue. Okay, so now look at what I've done so far by changing the camera profile, adjusting the basic sliders a little bit for exposure, and adjusting the color. Okay, so the aurora is really punching out a lot more and maybe less blue. Right. Next thing I'm going to do is check the highlights. Okay, because if your highlights, I'm just going to blow them out on purpose. Okay, so if your highlights are blown out like this, right, you'll lose the color in the aurora. Okay, so I'm just going to bring the highlights down, and I'm going to put this back where I had it, like so. Now look at the difference there. Okay, so we're keeping this color in the Aurora. Okay. I can also do a sky adjustment with the new Lightroom using a mask. Okay, so I can do select sky. And when it selects the sky, I can increase the highlights. Okay, the highlights are going to increase the stars. Okay, brighten the stars. Same with the whites. But look what's happening. It's affecting the Aurora too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to subtract the color range and subtract the green. Okay, I'm going to change my overlay to red here so you can see it. You know, when I turn this overlay on, the mask is now just applying to the blue parts of the sky. And I can change how much of that is affected with this slider here too. Okay, so now when I increase the whites, it's only affecting that background area. Okay, so I can get more stars. Okay, let's turn that on and off. Okay. See how it's actually affecting this area as well. So I'm going to do another subtract and just do a radial. So I'm not affecting. So subtract means I'm not affecting this area. Okay. So now you can see my overlay, my mask, like so. Okay. You want to make sure, yeah, you don't do that because it looks obvious. Okay. One more time, turn the mask off. So see how it's just punching up that sky a little bit more and the stars. Okay. If you're interested in more of these advanced Lightroom masking tools, we have actually a 6-hour class just on the masking tools that is available. We did that one with Pete Vandenine. You can purchase that on our website, right? So share the link to that one, please, Rob, in the chat if people are interested in that. One more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to brighten up the foreground a little bit. So I'm going to do another mask and a linear gradient this time. So I'm just going to bring it up from the bottom. And on this one, I am going to increase the white. So see how that brings out the snow and the exposure a tiny bit. Okay. So I don't want to do that in the sky. Okay. And let's see what happens if shadows. There we go. Okay, so now let's look at the before and after. I didn't do any cropping here because I didn't think it needed it, but we can check to see if it thinks that it's crooked. Okay, so Lightroom is trying to straighten the horizon based on the Aurora, so that didn't work. I'm just going to eyeball it and say, okay, I think the horizon is this tree line back here. So I'm going to straighten based on that just visually, right? Or I could use this little ruler here. Okay, so this angle thing. So if you click on this little ruler, again, it gives you a little crosshairs and a little ruler. And I'm going to start here sort of at this spot and the trees. And you can actually drag it off the image. So I'm going to line it up with that tree line, and then it will straighten when I let go based on that. And I think that's probably a good crop. That looks good. Maybe a little too much. Let's go back just a tiny bit. So scrubby slider works here too. Okay. So remember, all it's doing is it's allowing you to do smaller adjustments, slower. Okay. That looks pretty good. Okay, now the cool thing is, because we've done this to one image, right? Lightroom has a few different ways to get your edits, sorry, my nose is tickling, from one image to the other. Okay, we can do a copy. So I'm doing Command or Control C will give you this dialog box. Okay, so if I do check all, okay, I can copy and paste everything. So I can copy, right? I can simply go to the next image and then do Command or Control V, which is a paste. Okay, I'm just going to undo. Or you can click this previous button here, and it'll apply all of the settings from the image that's right before it. to this one. Okay, so it's kind of like copy and paste all, just in a shortcut, right? Finally, I can do sync. Okay, now I'm just going to do sync on 3 thumbnails. So see how I've selected 3 thumbnails and I've chosen one that's not part of this series. Oh, I need to get myself off the screen here. Oh, now you can see the thumbnails. Okay, so you see I've chosen 3 thumbnails and one is not part of this series. So I'm going to do sync on purpose. Okay, you have to make sure that the one that's edited is highlighted or on the screen, which it is. And then I choose sync and I get the same options. Okay, so I can sync only one thing or all of them. And now when I synchronize, okay, you can see that it's applied to this image, but it's also applied to this one and it's made it real purple, right? So I'm going to undo that first of all, and I do that just by reset, okay? Now that I've copied and pasted or synced the settings onto the second image, right, you see that it's done a lot of work for me, right? But whenever you do something where you've done a selection of the sky or the subject, the mask will have this little exclamation point on it, okay? So you see the sky, it doesn't know where the sky is here. So all you have to do is click on that part of it and then just click update. Okay, so keep in mind whenever you do a copy and paste of settings that has a sky or a subject selection, you just have to go and tell it again what is the subject. Okay, so now let's look at a before and after. Okay. There's a lot of more sort of red in this one than the previous one, so I think I'm actually going to leave a bit more magenta and a little bit less blue. Okay, so you can decide on the color balance. Okay. If I go more green, look at that. That looks, and it brings out the red in here. You can get purple northern lights as well, so really watch for that. Okay, so look at how much that brought out the color. Okay, and that is partly from choosing that color profile and then playing with the actual white balance. And if we want to take it further, okay, we can go into the HSL panel. We can use that targeted tool again. So if I want to darken the greens, remember if you click and hold while you're on the color that you want to adjust. So I can even intensify the color a bit more. Okay, I can even shift the color. I can saturate it. Okay, so I can give more saturation. Okay, or I can shift it. So if I want, oops, I did not shift. There we go. I can shift it to more yellow or more blue. Okay, and that's the hue adjustment. Let's do hue on this one. Let's see about red. We'll give it a bit more red. Okay, so now just doing that one, I can turn it off. And you can see that I'm adjusting the colors there as well. Like so. Okay. So before and after. But keep in mind that I did do this linear mask at the bottom here. And whenever you've done that, they're still fully editable. Okay, so Lightroom does what's called non-destructive editing. Okay, so I can move this around and adjust it, okay, at any time. Right, I can also check the crop because maybe this one doesn't need to be, oops, did the wrong reset. Maybe this one doesn't need to be tilted, and I think I will leave it the way it was. Nina wants to know, can I review the previous option? Which one, Nina? Yeah, which one did you want me to review again, Nina? Just let me know. Was it one of the tools that I just did? Okay. Have you seen the Aurora, Anne, or tried to capture it? I don't know if you guys can see it. Obviously not in Vancouver, but if you've been further north, you will get it up in northern BC, up towards Alaska. But it's actually less. It's harder to see with the eye unless it's really vibrant. You actually often will see more on your camera than with the eye. The options to copy. Okay. Let me just see. Okay. Review the previous option. Which one was that? Sync, copy, or paste? Okay, so copy. Okay, I just used the shortcut. But anything you can see under here, we're actually working on a new, where are we here? Edit. Okay, so you can go up to edit and then just do copy. We're working on a new keyboard shortcuts, what am I trying to say? Cheat sheet that you'll be able to download for Lightroom, and one for Luminar as well. So hang tight for those. We're in the process of having those designed. I could actually even show you a sneak peek. Okay, so yes, copy is there and paste is there, or you can see the keyboard shortcuts, Command or Control C. Okay. The other one was sync. Right. So if I go to the next image and I'm in the develop module, you can see there's a button that says previous, right? If I select multiple thumbnails, now it says sync. Okay, so you'll only see the sync button when you have multiple images selected. Okay, did that answer your question, Nina? Hi, Jim. Yes, this will be available later, right on the YouTube channel. So all of the live streams immediately are on the YouTube channel right as soon as we finish live. So I'll probably go about another 15 or 20 minutes or so today, and then we'll be back again next week at the same time, starting at 3 p.m. Eastern, which is 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, or noon Pacific time. If you are in Australia, it's going to be early morning around 7. If you are in Europe, I believe it's about 9 or 10 o'clock. Maybe one of you that are in Europe can tell us what time it is where you are. Great. Just another reminder again to please submit your images, and also give us a thumbs up, and thumbs up on this video, and like the video and subscribe to the channel. Okay? That helps us to come up more on YouTube search. Please do, Joe. Yes. No, I want you to share. Please share away, share to as many thousands and millions of people as you want. That's my friend Joe Swampy in Edmonton. She is an amazing Indigenous woman that does beadwork and sewing, and I've learned so much from her. So if you are learning something from me, then I'm happy, Joe, because I love that you're here. Yay! Hi. And I answered Nina's questions. Awesome. So yes, our cheat sheets are always free. We have a bunch of them on the website, and I do have a version of the cheat sheet that I can show people. Here, let's just look at this. So the Luminar one, let me close this. How do I get over here? I don't know how to close that, but let's see. So that's the Luminar one. So that is coming soon. So if you are using Luminar AI, there will be a keyboard shortcut that PDF that you'll be able to download soon. And the Lightroom one will look pretty much the same, but probably be a different color, just so we can differentiate. So, well, hey, Stephanie. I have a standing dog walking on Saturday. No worries. You can come late anytime and pick up where we left off and watch the beginning again later. Okay? Thanks so much, Nina. I love to see you all the time. And thanks so much for always joining in and watching. Great to have you. All right, so let's get back. So we've done the Aurora images. We're sort of going slow on these today, but let's see if I can do one more. I wanted to do this one of Anne's. Are you still here, Anne? Because when she sent me this, I don't know. I'm guessing these are real. They look like real orchids. And the thing that struck me about this is it looks like a negative. Okay. Anybody that's ever shot film back in the day, especially black and white film, and you've held your film up to the light, okay, it looks like a negative. So I don't know why, but the first thing that I thought of when I saw this is I want to invert it. Okay. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that in both Luminar and in Lightroom. Okay. So a couple things. Now I notice that you've made this monochromatic. Okay. So it looks like she has shot it in the monochromatic mode in the camera. Okay, so I'm going to go back and do two things. Okay, I'm going to invert it first, but I'm also going to show you the color version, because if you are shooting raw and you shoot in the monochrome picture style mode, I think we have a couple of articles on the website, Rob, about using monochrome. Actually, there's a challenge for shooting black and white, if you could share that one. Okay. So when you shoot raw and you shoot in monochromatic picture style, you'll see the black and white image on your camera. But when you bring it into software like Lightroom, like this, you'll see that the color is still there. Okay. She says she sent the wrong file. Oh, that's okay. send the right one next week. I'll do it next week. But I'm going to have fun with this one, so just hang on. Okay, so you'll see that the color is still there. Okay, but when you choose the monochromatic mode in the camera, what happens is you lose the ability to edit the colors later. Okay, so you can see that that black and white panel is actually grayed out. Okay, so if you want to be able to edit the tones, okay, instead of choosing the monochromatic in the camera, choose the Adobe monochrome. Okay, and now when you go down to the black and white panel, okay, it's already black and white mix, but now you can adjust the tones. Okay, so see, you can, by adjusting the sliders, it affects the original colors in the image. Okay, so I can get rid of that leaf at the bottom that's green by having it in Adobe monochrome instead of the camera monochrome. Okay, so that's number one. Okay, so look at that green leaf. I can really get rid of it. Okay. What I'm going to do, and we can use the targeted tool here, okay, as well, because I wanted to try and fix that light area. I'm going to make this as white as possible. Let's try that. I'm going to show you how to invert this image. Okay, so if it's like a negative, or you want to make something funky that looks like a negative, you need to go into the tone curve area. Okay, so in the tone curve, I have a whole video on doing tone curve. If you could please share that one, Rob. He's busy finding other challenges. I make him busy. Okay, so what you want to do is curve displays the same thing as the histogram. Okay, you can see that the histogram up here, all right, looks very similar to the one in the background behind the curve. So black is on the left, white is on the right. So to invert an image, all you got to do is invert this line. Okay, so the line goes from bottom left to top right, and we're going to just switch these two around. Okay, so now all the whites are black and the blacks are white. So we've basically inverted the image. Okay, so now it is a negative, but I thought it would just be kind of fun. Okay, then I'm just going to crop it a little bit because I didn't want this bit over here. And let's keep the aspect ratio. I'm going to come in a little bit more on this orchid, right? Like so. So I thought that was kind of fun. The other thing I'm going to do is flip it. Okay, so often I will flip images left to right. Okay, if I feel, I'm going to do this to a copy. If I feel that it's better portrayed the other way around. Okay, now this one I flipped for the reason of leading lines. Okay, so your eye reads a photo like you read anything visual or you're looking at. And in our society, in Western society, we read from top to bottom, left to right. So we read this way, right? So you come in here and you see this flower, and then your eye ends up going out of the picture because of this leading line. So this leading line is actually taking you out of the picture, okay? When we flip it, now it's taking you into the picture, into the flower, okay? See, I knew you would love the abstract. Anne is all about the abstracts, right? So I thought you would have some fun with this one. Now you have to go and try this, okay? So I'm going to show you how to do the same thing in Luminar, okay? So I'm just going to revert this one. So now I'm going to open this. Remember I told you about opening the raw file in Luminar? So I'm going to do that this time. So export. And oops, got to get on the right menu. Open source file. Okay, so now it's going to take the raw file over to Luminar AI. Okay. Rob has shared a link to the curves tutorial and the monochrome challenge. Okay, so if you want to practice seeing light, this is a great exercise or a great challenge for you to do. If you have trouble seeing light and shadow, give this one a try, right? Of course, Luminar opens on my other monitor again. Let me just shrink it a little bit. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to go straight into the tools. I'm going to go, actually, let's leave it color, right? If you're not sure where to find curves in Luminar, it's under the light tool at the bottom under the advanced tools, right? And if you've struggled before with this histogram in Luminar that's really small, you see how tiny it is? There's a bigger histogram on the curves tool, okay? See that? So it's in the background. So if you want to see your curve, just go here. So now I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Okay, now look what happens. Now we have an inverted image in color. Okay, but that's kind of cool, right? Remember I talked about the composition tool before and straightening. So there's the straighten button that I mentioned earlier in Luminar. There's also flip. Okay, so I can easily flip this one. And I'm going to keep the aspect ratio the same, I think. Okay, I got to get rid of this histogram. It's bugging me. Okay, so I'm going to crop this in like I did the other one, like so. Okay, so now we have an inverted color image. But guess what? We can do even more playing. And you can do this in Lightroom as well. So I did this on what's called the RGB channel, which means it does all the colors inverted, okay? I can also do this on individual channels, okay? So I can do red, green, blue. So I can see that there is some blue in this image. So I can actually invert that too. Okay, now, okay, am I blowing your mind yet, Anne? Now look at what we got. Okay, I can try it on green. Okay, so if you want real abstract, okay, now we're going crazy, but it's kind of neat, right? Or if we like this blue one, maybe we don't want to go quite so far. So instead of going all the way, I'm just inverting it part way. See that? And then if we're happy with something like that, we can actually just dial the saturation down and say, wow, that's kind of cool. Just dial the saturation down a little bit. Right? And we can continue to play with it. Okay, so keep in mind that anytime you do something like this, when you take it from Lightroom over to Luminar, now you are doing destructive editing, because when it brings it back into Lightroom, you'll have a new finished image. Okay, so I can really get crazy with these colors by playing with the curves. Okay, you can also just play with the curves this way. Okay, so curves is a really kind of funky thing that you can play around with to create abstracts, and that's what really struck me about this image, is that it had lots of potential to do some really wacky things. Right. Yes, you can make it match your room colors. Absolutely. So play with this image, Anne, and I would love for you to actually share this in the DPM Facebook group. Rob, you're going to have to grab a link for that. So play with this one, Anne, and see what you can come up with playing around with curves, and share that in the Facebook group. I'd love to see it. AJ says, what if Andy Warhol had this software? Well, he did have Photoshop. So, and Illustrator, and you can do lots of the same things. You can do exactly the same thing in Photoshop with the curves tool as well. So he kind of did. He kind of did. Okay, now I started a trend. Now Holly's going to be matching her flowers as well. Great idea, right? I personally love purple. I have 3 purple jackets. So yeah, I'm kind of the purple girl. This is a great point that Anne brings up. She has her camera set to shoot both RAW and monochrome. So I'm guessing that you have it set to JPEG and RAW, which means that if you set it to the monochrome mode, you will get a RAW file that has the color information like this one, and you will get a JPEG that is purely black and white, right? So that is a great point. This has been a lot of fun images today. See, I told you this one was fun, Anne. So even though you sent me the wrong one, look what we were able to do with that. And then we can do things in Luminar to do, mystical, right? Now we've got this purple yellow thing. And now I'm not liking the yellow so much. So I'm going to go back in here and say, well, I just want less yellow. Haha. Now we got purple. Look at that. Look at that. Ooh, I like that. Ladies, do we like that? I like that. You can also add a glow. So glow, I usually use Orton effect, but glow, this one here, the second one down, which is just called glow, actually makes the white areas of the image like glow and be soft. So look at how that's bringing the flower out more and sort of minimizing this, right? So I actually really like what that's doing, right? We can even make it brighter or darker. Contrast or less contrast. So many tools. So the thing is that all of these editing softwares have so many different tools that you could literally keep going forever and playing with things. Color harmony is another one in Luminar that you could play with. And this kind of image is great for literally doing just this, playing around, right? Take an image like this, go and shoot some flowers or an abstract or picture of an old shoe in your house, whatever, and then just play around for the pure purpose of playing, nothing else. Doesn't matter if you come up with an image that's art or something that you want to share on social media or not, just play around with these tools and learn what they do, right? And is like in Luminar for this project. Absolutely. Fun project for the weekend. Actually, maybe I could assign that to everybody. Okay, if you're all watching, anybody that's watching this, I want you to go and play around with curves. That is your project for this week. Play around with curves like it's a Crayola. Awesome. Assuming you can combine mask and curve to isolate parts of the photo. Not in this case. If you want to do that, AJ, you'd have to actually bring it into Photoshop to do that, because the develop tool in Luminar is not maskable, right? However, if we add what's called the local masking tools, you get these tools here, but you don't get the curves. Okay, so the develop is only applying to the raw file, so you can't mask it. If you do want to mask it, same thing in Lightroom, you can't mask it. Yeah, it's tricky. You can't mask a curve. You'd have to do it in Photoshop is the short answer. Yep. The other one I was going to show you is color harmony, okay? Because this one allows you to play around with different split toning as well. So you can do these kinds of things in here and even increase the playing around with colors even more. Okay, so you can have, let's just reset this one, right? You can adjust the shadows, midtones, and highlights and play with the colors here. So if I want more cyan in the shadows, okay, if I want more magenta, I can have more purple. Okay, so I can really start to hone the colors that I want on this flower, right? And you could turn it on and off. That's a little bit more subtle, right? Kind of like that. Now that was the shadows. And then if we play with highlights, we can do something completely different, right? Maybe we want more blue in the highlights. And again, I'm just playing. One of the things that I suggest for playing is take your sliders to all the way, both ways, and just see what they do. So I'm not liking what the highlights do. I'm looking at both ends of the spectrum and then going, no, right? Or not, okay? So I'm happy with that. So we created this from that, okay? So we've created something completely different. I'm going to apply that and hop back over to Lightroom, okay? Anne says she used curves in Photoshop and does inverse mask. So you mean you remove it from things that you don't want it to apply to. So yeah, so you'd have to do that as an adjustment layer in Photoshop. one tip for you, Anne, is make sure that you're doing it as a smart object. So when you apply curves, if you do a curves adjustment, I'll actually show that really quickly. How many people here use Photoshop? Because I can show you that if I open this up in Photoshop. I can't remember what's the original now. This is the original, right? I think. I don't even remember what it looks like anymore. We've mucked with it so much. I'm going to take it into the color one again so we can flip it. Okay, so I'm going to open this in Lightroom and I'm going to do edit in smart object in Photoshop. Okay, so please tell me in the chat, say yes, I'm using Photoshop. And there's a big difference between Photoshop Elements and Photoshop CC. Okay, so tell me yes, you're using Photoshop CC if you are. Okay, so now I have the same image open in Photoshop, okay, and they give you these adjustments here. Okay, so whenever you choose one of these adjustments, okay, that's the curves one. So if I just click it, what happens is it actually adds it as an adjustment layer. Okay, so when I do this, it's applying it as a layer. So I can do the inversion here, right? And then I still have all of the same adjustments. Okay, so I can do red, green, blue. Which one did I do? I did blue, didn't I? Right. So I did the blue. I think we did the green. I don't even remember what we did now. We've got something totally different. Now we got green flowers. Oh, there we go. There we go. That's better. That's what I did. Okay, so now we got the purple again, but you'll see that when it applies it as an adjustment layer, it's got the mask built in automatically, okay? And to adjust a mask, you need to make sure that you have your brush set to black and white. So all I do, let me get Anne's comment off here. All I do is hit X or D, pardon me, on the keyboard, and it defaults these colors to black and white, and then X switches them. Okay, so one is your foreground and one is your background color. So when you choose the brush, which is somewhere in here, this guy right here, or B on your keyboard, so just hit B on your keyboard, it's going to paint with the default brush, which is black. Okay, so painting with black, I'm just going to do it at 100% to show you what happens. Okay, so when I paint with black, it paints on the mask and hides that part of that adjustment. Okay, so I actually have an article on the website on, or another video, Rob, if you could please find that one on layers and masks, because what a mask is doing is it's literally like, okay, if I have this piece of paper in front of my face and I cut a hole in it, you're going to see me where the hole is, right? So essentially what I've just done here is I've cut a hole in this layer where I've done this curves adjustment. So now I'm seeing the bottom layer through, which is the original picture. Okay. So that's about masking and layers. So I hope that helps. So I'm going to save this and go back to Lightroom. And now you'll see that I've got this really kind of funky mess with this layer here. And when I go back to Lightroom, it's now saved that same thing. Okay. So you can see I've got this mess. Okay. If you want to get back, and I did a complete video on this, actually it's with the Luminar AI workflow as a plugin. If you could share that one as well, Rob. Rob's probably looking for the curves one, I think, and also, did you share curves, masking, and the Luminar AI? Yeah, so there's the masking article, and also the one on Luminar AI as a plugin. So if you've done something in Photoshop, now you can see that this is a Photoshop document, okay? So a PSD. If you want to get back to it and go from where you left off, okay, that's where you would use Luminar as a plugin. Okay, so I demonstrated the full workflow in that other video, but this time, if you want to get back to Photoshop, you want to choose edit in Photoshop and edit original. That is the key, because then when I click edit, it's going to take me back to Photoshop with the same layer. Okay, so now you can see that I've still got this layer, right? And I can turn it off and it gets me right back, or I can edit this layer, right? I can delete the mask or clear the mask and so on. Okay. I'm just just going to select it and undo. Okay. So now I can edit the curves, put it back, do whatever I want, or I could take this into Luminar. Okay. So if I take this into Luminar, you want to do it as a smart object. So I'm going to do what's called a stamp layer. Now I'm hitting a whole bunch of keys on my keyboard to get this. Command Alt Shift E. And that makes a layer that's called a stamped layer, which is a combination of everything below it. Right? Now, I'm not sure if there's a shortcut or there's a thing in here to get to that. I know that it's a shortcut. Stamped layer. Let me see. New layer, new. It might be in here under layers. I can never remember where to find it because I always just do this keyboard shortcut. New stamp layer. See, I can't remember how to get to it. Here's a good point, actually. If you don't remember how to do something, you can do help and search. Yeah, I don't think there is. There's only a keyboard shortcut to create that. So unfortunately, it's 4 keys to do that. Once I've created this new layer, I can then open Luminar as a plugin, okay? But before I do that, I want to right-click and convert it to a smart object. So whenever you're applying any kind of plugin or filter, make sure that it's a smart object, and you can tell because it's got this little thing in the bottom here, okay? When it's not a smart object, you see that it doesn't have that, okay? So I'm going to apply smart object. Now I can open Luminar as a plugin, okay? I'm just going to apply something. I'm just going to, let's do the glow or something real fast here. And says there's no shortcut for that. Yeah, it's unfortunately it's 4 keys. So there's no way to get to that quickly. Okay, so there's Luminar. I'm just going to do the glow thing that we liked. Just to apply something so you can see it. And what else? What else can we do? Let's do maybe dramatic. Let's do a little dramatic there. Okay, so now we've applied something, okay? And I'm going to click apply. And when I come back to Photoshop, you'll see that it's applied as a filter on that layer. And I can get back to Luminar and then re-edit it. Okay, so if you want to do curves, you can use the mask here in Photoshop. If you want to use Luminar, you could see that it comes in as a layer, right? Then I applied the smart object, right, with a mask. So I can actually mask this here in Photoshop, or just by double clicking here on the word, it'll take me back to Luminar, and all the stuff that I did in Luminar will still be there. Okay. So that is a truly non-destructive workflow, right? So now I can't remember who asked the question about masking curves. Some people are using Photoshop. And thanks, Deb. Yeah, that was a fun one. I didn't know where I was going to go with this one, but I decided to play with curves, and that's what I came up with. So let's see. The 4 keys for the stamp layer are, I got to look at my keyboard. Alt or Option, Command or Control. Again, it's going to depend if you're Mac or Windows. Shift E. Okay, so it's, maybe I should just show you on my keyboard. Actually, hang on here. Let's just do that. Okay, so here. Let me see if I can show you on my keyboard. Right, so I'm doing, when I say it's these 2. Right, these 2 plus Shift E. Right, those 2 plus Shift and E, all 4. Right. Oh, that was complicated. Great question, Vicki. That was a great little demonstration. Well, I've got a whole lot of purple on my screen now, so I'm feeling rather purple. I received another purple flower from Ron, but he's not here today, or I haven't seen him, so I'm going to save that one for another day. So I have a question for everybody. Yes, Rob has Control-Alt on a PC. So it's Command Option on Mac, Control-Alt on a PC. Thank you, Rob. What is Shift Option Command 3? Shift Option Command 3. Is that another? I'm afraid to press that. Shift Option Shift Option Command 3. What does that do, Anne? I'm curious now. Shift Option Command 3. Oh, I was in Photoshop. I'm curious. I'm going to go back to Photoshop and try Anne's shortcut now because I don't even know what that does. All right. No, it's an E. Yeah, it's an E. It's not a 3. I'm going to come back over here and just remind everybody to submit their images. She says it was an oops. Okay, good. Because I thought I was losing it. We're coming up on an hour and a half today, so I want to stop there so I don't overload everybody's brain. And I have an appointment with Holly in 30 minutes, so I need to top up my coffee before we have our meeting. But I would love to just do a quick little survey of everybody here today. What have you learned today? Did you pick up one thing that you're going to go and apply or try? So tell me in the chat. What did you pick up today? As anybody that's watching this video later as a replay, go through the chat and see what everybody else learned and see if you can't pick up some things for your own workflow. Did you pick up something about curves today? Maybe you've never used curves before. Did you pick up something about the HSL panel? I use HSL panel on a lot of my images, hue saturation and luminance or lightness on almost all my images, right? And says, love the Luminar touches. Excellent. Thanks, Anne. Oh, thanks, Holly. Great testimonial. Share a link to our tutoring page, please, Rob, since Holly is promoting it for us. Maybe we'll have to give her a little discount for being an ambassador or something. Holly's a multiple session tutor with me, and tell them what you're learning. I've got another lady that's been doing tutoring with me for a year and a half, and her photography has really taken a turn for the next level, as has Holly's. So thanks for that great testimonial, Holly. I really appreciate it. Where are we? She learned I need to learn to play with curves this year. Awesome. What is it that you're trying to do on our website to register, Jean-Philippe? You don't want to register or log in if you're trying to sign up for just to sign up for our email list. All you need to do is there should be something in the sidebar, or just go to the Start Here button, Jean-Philippe, and you can sign up there. So you don't need to log in unless you have purchased one of our paid products, right? Inverting the blacks and whites on curves. Yeah, that was a cool one, hey? Curves changes. Stephanie learned that as well. Awesome. Copy the edits to another photo in the same shoot. Yeah, so you can actually, remember, if you have similar images, sync to all of them and then just go tweak each of them as needed, right? So it saves you a lot of time when you're doing that, for sure. Never played with curves before. Anne says, awesome. So we got two Annes today. Anne with an E and Anne without an E. A Luminar hat. Right. I know Holly wants a Luminar hat. Okay. You know what? I'm going to figure out how to get you a Luminar hat, Holly. We'll talk about that later. We're going to get you a hat. Nancy, love the curves. Going to try it. Fun editing today. Yeah, I wasn't sure where we were going to go with that, but I liked how it turned out as well. I'm glad you enjoyed that. Efficient ways of using a Lightroom and shortcuts, AJ said. We currently have a page where you can actually download our old version of the Lightroom shortcuts, and they are there. Rob, if you want to share that one, you can still download that one. It's just not as pretty as the one that I showed you for Luminar, so we're just prettying it up, right? So you can download that one for now, and actually we'll probably send out the new one to everybody that previously signed up for it. So you can go and grab that now if you want, AJ. Thanks so much, Holly. She says her photography's taken off in the 15 months working with me. She has a website now and is way more confident with her skills. Yes, we were working on her Smug Mug website, and I'm guessing that's what we're going to be working on again today, as well as some other things. So thanks for that, Holly, and I'm glad I inspired you to create a Smug Mug website. Two more things for you to share, Rob, before we sign out. So the Lightroom presets page where AJ can get that, and also the Smug Mug thing. Let me see if I can grab one of those because Rob's looking like he's overloaded. Smug. So I did a challenge. So for those of you that don't have your own portfolio page or you don't have your own gallery of any kind, I did a challenge a while back. I think it was actually probably more than a year ago to create your own portfolio page. And that's what Holly is referencing. Okay, so it was about making your own page to display your images. I just have to find it. If you take up that challenge, you don't necessarily need to use SmugMug. That's what I use, and that's what I recommend. You can actually get started with SmugMug for as little as I think about $67 a year. And it also acts as a backup for your images, which is something else that we plan on talking about in a webinar too. Ironically enough, it wasn't a popular topic on our Facebook poll in our group, but it should be, because if you're not have a good backup set up, then you are in big trouble if something happens. Okay, I found the project. I'm going to share that in the chat for everybody. There we go. All right, so that's the one for creating your own challenge, and Rob's got the Lightroom keyboard shortcuts. So I think that's it for today. Thanks everybody for joining once again. Please remember to give this a like and subscribe to the channel, as well as setting yourself a notification to remind you when we're going live. Seems like this new time is working out for people in Europe as well as Australia and North America. So we're going to keep it for a while, into the spring anyways. I will see you again next week. Take care and stay warm if you're in the Northern Hemisphere.